8 to 10 a.m. and you are listening to Salam Media.
We were talking the other day that when it comes to sort of Muslim world news, there's always something or the other that will develop. You don't ask for it, it just lands. Whether it's an attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque, whether it's something else at home, something else will develop. And the latest one that's developed is the visit by Mufti Menk, Mufti Ismail Menk, to an iftar dinner. Nothing strange about that. To an iftar dinner in the UAE, nothing strange about that. Excepting, he was seated with a whole lot of different people of different faiths, but in particular with a rabbi, and nothing strange about that either, excepting there's a belief that rabbi in particular has been a key person, a key driver in normalizing Israeli and UAE relations to the angst of many other people around the Islamic world, okay, in particular. So many people have wondered, like, well, Mufti Menk's presence there, in fact, has added further to the belief of normalizing the relations between Israel and the UAE. So we're going to talk about that. We'll play some sound from Mufti Menk that he's responded to that. We'll also chat to Thembisa Fakude and get his thoughts, so listen out for that, right? But in the meantime, I'm going to start with reading a letter by Professor Ziad Motala. So he's based in Washington, but he's written an open letter, and this maybe sums up some of the issues that those who are not happy with Mufti Menk's visit there and who he was seated next to and whose hand he shook had to say, right? So he says, this is the open letter, the problem is not interfaith meetings. Interfaith meetings must be conducted within a paradigm that validates and affirms the human dignity of every human being. The problem is meeting with someone publicly where the individual or individuals espouses views that are against basic human dignity, including proclaiming Zionism as a virtue. Now, that individual has no regard for human rights and represents a view of religion that validates the oppression of other human beings. Sitting and smiling next to such a person validates that individual. In the case of Dubai and the Saudi Arabians, these absolute monarchs are devoid of decency. They are brutal and corrupt dictators that will cozy up and affirm any other dictator, even if the dictator is responsible for the massacre of Muslims, such as Modi of India or the Israeli regime. Now, the Dubai and the Saudi rulers care little about religion. They care about the linkages that furthers their own financial and political interests. A meeting of tolerance sponsored by the rulers in Dubai and Saudi Arabia would be akin to an anti-Semitism program sponsored by a Nazi or an anti-genocide against Muslims meeting sponsored by Modi. Now, in the Quran, we have a verse that reads, Summum Bukmun Umyun, warning against being deaf, dumb, or blind. Mufti Menk is a powerful religious scholar whose influence extends across the globe. The optics of his chit-chat with an unrepentant Zionist is horrible. The optics of sharing and participating on a platform sponsored by the corrupt Dubai government, who have little concern for decency, the truth, or human rights of Muslims or anyone else, is a matter of grave concern. So that's the open letter from Professor Ziad Motala. Now, what do you make of all of that? And if you have an opinion, you can post comments on the bottom of this piece here on any of these Salam Media social media platforms. You can also WhatsApp voice note us 061 766 0355. Got that? 061 766 0355. Okay, so that's the one part, right? Now Mufti Menk himself has spoken about he's issued a statement. He's also done a video, right? And in the video he has said a few things. So firstly, I'm going to play two videos of Mufti Menk. He gives background of what actually happened at this UAE interfaith meeting for iftar in Dubai. Here it is.
So my brothers and sisters, something happened that was very different from how it was portrayed later on. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I know from amongst you, there are people who are genuine. That's the majority. And then there are mischief makers trying to push agendas. We need to be careful of them. Then there are journalists. Each one of them has a different level of fear of Allah if they're Muslim. And each one of them could be belonging to a little group or sometimes heavily politicized to a certain country. or to a certain cause, and so they look at everyone else as enemies. They seize the opportunity of something to just say a word that would put down everyone who doesn't support their own cause. So let me explain to you what happened. The third day, and I left later on after the event on that day, and the masjid event, I left, and I actually left the UAE because I had to continue in my journeys. Right now, if you want to know where I am, I'm speaking to you, I am in Doha, in the capital of Qatar. And this evening we have a massive event in Qatar, the amphitheater. And inshallah, I pray it will be a huge success by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to speak all about Ramadan. Literally, that's the topic I was given, all about Ramadan. And inshallah, we want to showcase it to the people and talk about it and what we're going to benefit from it and so on and so forth and what it does to us, inshallah. But the evening before I left Dubai, I was invited by the hosts, the Islamic affairs, to say, today we'll be having iftar, inshallah. I had iftar anyway to the previous few days. And that particular day, we had iftar at a certain place where they had invited people from all walks of life. Most of them were Muslim, probably 1,000+ people from what my eyes saw. And thereafter, I met a lot of Muslims, a lot of Christians, a lot of Hindus, a lot of Sikhs, and many others. And we sat for iftar. I had my iftar. Meaning I broke my fast. I made my Salatul Maghrib, greeted a few people and went away. Those who know me know I don't like to sit for too long somewhere. I like to just, sit, do whatever I have to and leave. Because we were there for an iftar, I had that iftar. Just before iftar, a Jewish man sat next to me. I asked him who he was and where he was from. He was from New York, lived in Dubai for quite a few years. He said about 8 years, I think. And mashallah, there was a very light discussion. I had no presentation there. I had no major participation there. I was just a guest who came in and had iftar, made Salatul Maghrib and went. The idea of that iftar was in order to showcase the Ramadan to the non-Muslims who are resident of the UAE. That's not a bad idea. And it happens in London, it happens in Canada, it happens in US, it happens in Muslim countries, it happens in so many communities, it happens so much across the globe where, the iftar and the Ramadan and Islam and so on and the teachings and the way it happens and what it's supposed to do for us and the ambience of it is all showcased to people who don't know much about Islam. So later on, when I left, I saw a few news articles that were quite accurate initially. That there was this iftar arranged by so and so for people of all faiths to get together.
Okay, so that's the one video from Mufti Menk, giving his background into how he got to be at that event and how he landed up there and then who he met, right? And how much or how little he spoke. And you may have your own thoughts on that, right? But the second video, he speaks about what he sees as an attempt at mischief making. Groups of people hell-bent on making something much bigger than it really is. So this is what he had to say.
I noticed, and I'm going to say a name, I'm in Doha right now, and I'm in Qatar. And imagine that would prove to you that I've got nothing to do with the politics of everything. We're above it, subhanAllah. But truth be said, Al Jazeera Arabic wrote a very mischievous title. They gave it a very deceiving title that was serving an agenda of hate, nothing else. And when I saw it, I said, this is a lie. They had a picture, the picture they chose. And I don't even know if they were talking about that particular event because there may have been other events elsewhere, I don't know, but most probably. The picture they chose was one where I was seated with a Jewish man on this side and one of the organizers on the other and so on. And you know what? There were people of other faiths on the same table. And what had happened? So they wrote, oh, this was an iftar celebrating normalization of whatever, and they wrote whatever served their agenda, which I felt was very, very wrong. You know, I didn't think so badly of Al Jazeera or others until I saw this article, and I said to myself, the person here doesn't know the damage that they're doing. Intentionally, they have misconstrued, misinterpreted, written a headline that's going to get across the globe that is so false. It is absolute rubbish. That's what they wrote, total nonsense. And they added in the article things of whatever politics might have happened in the past or is happening, which had nothing to do with the particular event. Absolutely nothing. So, you know, what do you do now? I guess it happens to people, to politicians, to religious people who are popular, to people who are known across the globe and so on. They seize this opportunity to say things. My name wasn't written at all because they didn't. I was not one of the organizers. I didn't know anything. My name wasn't written at all in that article. But obviously people would recognize me because I'm a known person. Later on, our Muslim brothers from Islamic, journalistic channels that document whatever, or they speak about the pillars of Islam, or they speak about what's going on in the Muslim Ummah, which is a good thing in essence, but they decided to carry the false tale, and they decided to portray it as though Mufti Menk is, compromising his faith and this. Wallahi, that didn't happen. I just want to clarify. We stand with our brothers and sisters in Palestine and with Masjid al-Aqsa forever. Forever. We stand with them. We believe in the cause and we believe in it forever. Subhanallah. And for your information, the last time I tried to go there, they denied me entry. They actually told me, sorry, you can't come. And there we go. So, subhanallah, we still stand for
I think that's some of the comments he made. He then also sent out a text release, which I will maybe pick out and quote some aspects of it in a moment, right? Let's then move on to Thembisa Fakude, right? So he once of Al Jazeera, just so that you know, but is also currently a senior fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues, and therefore better known as AfriCID. So Thembisa, good chatting to you. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So I thought, let's get someone who has an understanding of geopolitics, besides just religious issues, to give us an overview of what they may think, okay? And therefore, you're number one. So appreciate your presence, right? What do you make of what you've heard and your understanding of what is developed regarding Mufti Menk?
Well, it's disappointing for a man who loves media and who loves attention of the media. You need to understand that there are certain trappings within the media, and you need to know how to respond. And you can't just then start criticizing the same people that have made you popular, simply because this time around they've decided to report the actual facts that have happened. In the past, we've had a free ride, and we have not been questioned. But this time around, it's part and parcel of our business. And you should understand and appreciate that you get sometimes positive reports, and you can have negative reports. But you need to have a skill of how you go about responding. You don't then start, chastising all those that are criticizing you simply because this time around are having a different reporting to what you're used to. So, for me, it was a disappointment. I think he could have handled it much better. He hasn't said sorry, by the way, notwithstanding that he was played by the Emiratis. The UAE is known for this, and if he doesn't know that, he must ask Hamza Yusuf, who was also once a very prominent, trusted and respected alim and a Muslim leader who was betrayed by the Emiratis and forced to utter certain statements that went against the Muslim consensus, particularly in Palestine. Abdurrahman al-Sudais, the Imam of the Haram, went on also to say some opposite stuff. So this is the problem of these alims, imams, and celebrity imams. They like the limelight, but they're not prepared. And the etiquette of politics and diplomacy. I mean, anyone who in his position will ordinarily ask who's going to be sitting next to me. Not unless he's employing people who don't care about those kind of things. But it happens in politics. And for a person of his stature, I would expect that he will make a call first to say, okay, who's sitting next to me? Because he was played. by the Emiratis for their own purposes, and they actually managed to achieve their objective in this regard.
Okay, so you've said lots of things. Let me just start with the media part, which is the first part that you brought up, right? So whether he agrees with how it was covered, and clearly he doesn't agree. He believes there was sort of mischief making, and it was magnified because I think his testimony is that he happened to be seated next to this rabbi, right? And they spent a couple of minutes talking, which I mean is not unusual. We also spoke to people that we don't necessarily agree with, and then they went their own way, and that's come across as like the big story, right? So his criticism, and he's been particularly critical of what he called Al Jazeera, and then other Muslim media voices that normally speaks around Muslim issues, right? You're saying that he's got that wrong, and he should have done that differently. What should he have done?
Well, what was wrong with that report? Was he not sitting next to a Zionist rabbi? That's a report. Okay, he was sat next to a Zionist rabbi. That's the truth. We don't know what they talked about, but they were friendly, and the best he could have done is to come out and give a statement to say, listen, instead of him going and criticizing journalists and calling them that they've got some ulterior motives, etc., which actually, by the way, is digging himself much more deeper into the hole, he should have just come out and said, listen, I apologize, I wasn't aware of this. But again, you question the caliber and the capability of those people around him, who's supposed to understand the diplomatic etiquettes, that if you attend such functions, you find out who's going to be sitting next to you before you accept an invitation, and that's what happens. And the Emiratis, by the way, are known for this. They've done it to so many people. And we know some of the well-respected ulama around the world who have fell into this trap, and I've mentioned the two. Hamza Yusuf, great guy, good friend of mine, by the way. Abdurrahman al-Sudais, the Imam of the Haram al-Sharif in Makkah, same story. And they don't care. Instead, they'll come and start criticizing the media for reporting the actual events.
Are you suggesting the normally media-savvy Mufti Menk, and certainly someone who has a great knack of being able to reduce something very complex into easy to understand day-to-day occurrences, right? That he was naive in accepting the invitation. He was naive in not understanding how he could well possibly be played, and therefore he didn't put any conditions before that.
No, that's true. I mean, and I blame people around him, and I blame him. I mean, he loves the media, right? He loves to be on the news. He loves to be on social media. That comes with certain type of responsibility and planning. You don't just enter these kind of things. And you set yourself out there, expect to be challenged sometimes, but also you need to prepare yourself on how you respond to the media, because the way he's responding is not going to make things easy for him.
So I tell you what, I mean, so here's an interesting one, Thembisa. There's two responses. One is the video, which I've read out, and you're right. The video doesn't actually speak about the rabbi directly. It doesn't speak about the politics of Israel and the UAE, accepting that Mufti Menk comes out very clearly as a supporter of the Palestinian cause. He made that point in the video, right? Subsequently, and I've texted him, and he's in Qatar right now, as we know, as he said, and they've sent back a reply, which is a media reply. So this is not in the video, which I think is very interesting, right? He talks about the false titles and what happened, so that we know, right? But the more important one is, and I just want to read this part, right? I would never betray my Palestinian brothers and sisters. I stand in solidarity with them and all other oppressed people. I am not an activist, but I'm a Muslim. That's the one part of it. And this is the important part. If my Palestinian brothers and sisters or anyone else feels betrayed by me having unintentionally met a man at a generic open iftar, whom I later discovered to be at the center of much controversy, I apologize unconditionally. I pray they can see the good we do and forgive the mistakes we have made, right? And then he finally says, I will definitely be much more careful in future with all functions, engagements, and photos. Now, that's in text form, which I have with me from him, but it's not in video form. Is that what you were looking for?
Well, that's what he should have done in the first place. But again, I blame people around him. He needs to understand that he's reached a certain position in terms of political Islam and who he is. You can't just pitch in invitations without asking who's who where, who's going to be sitting next to me and whatever. And for him not to mention the name of the rabbi, it's a bit problematic as well, because he knows the name of the rabbi. And the best he would have done, if he wants to demonstrate sincerity, name the man. Don't say I was sitting next to a Jewish man. Just say who he was and how this happened, and he wasn't told. That's one. But the other thing is, again, it shows a level of naivety, particularly when it comes to matters of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, and the normalization process. He should know that. That's the next point.
So the narrative, certainly from those who are Palestinian supporters, and I mean that's just about everybody in the Muslim world, but there are people who are activists, actively, pushing the Palestinian interest, right? They've suggested that his presence next to this particular rabbi who was involved in the normalization of relations between Israel and the UAE, right? So there's a difference between a rabbi practicing his Jewish faith versus a rabbi speaking on behalf of the Israeli state, right? That Mufti Menk's presence next to the person, intended or unintended, has served to create a further normalization of this relationship. So from an image point of view, do you think that's true that it has done that, whether he was played to do that or not without even understanding it?
Yes, it was. And I'm sure he was incentivized to come to that iftar, definitely. And that's probably one of the things that attracted him or led him to attend the iftar in the first place. It probably was
what sort of incentivization?
It was probably flown first class. It was accommodated in some 5-star place in Dubai. I can assure you that what happened, and that was attractive. But the other thing is the political naivety of Mufti Menk. He's supposed to know the entire game of the Emiratis when it comes to normalization. Who goes confidently now and comfortably to go and sit with Mohammed bin Salman, notwithstanding that he continues to kill innocent people in Yemen, and he went on to kill Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah.
It's the same,
it's interesting you say so, because let me interject you and give you a fascinating story. When I went for the Hajj 5 years ago, as you would know, I mean, a friend of mine from Cape Town who performed the Hajj with me said to me that he is a reluctant visitor to the holy lands of Makkah and Medina because of the political space that they're in right now. Okay, but he's not a reluctant visitor to the religious aspect of the Hajj, because he wants to be there. So his only way of attending and performing the Hajj was to deliver a dam, which is a compensation for an irregular Hajj, right? As the only redeeming feature for himself, which is what he said he intended to do. So I'm bringing that up because here was a man who wants to perform the Hajj, right? But who understood that it's a holy place on unholy ground, if I can put it that way, right? And his way of satisfying himself, because the other option was not to go for the Hajj, was to say, I will go, but I will pay a punishment for it. And that's what you're saying, that we need to be a lot more savvy about who we're speaking with, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think he understands the power that he has assumed as a leader of the Muslim community. I mean, he's proud that he was in Dubai. I think it was Abu Dhabi, and now he's in Qatar. And what happens if he gets invited by the Saudis and Mohammed bin Salman hugs and chit chats with him and they eat together? That's it's another serious political decision he has to make. And by the look of things, he might just accept that invitation, and that's problematic. So I think he needs to understand that he now holds a very serious position. And unfortunately, Islamically, you can't really separate politics from your religious responsibilities. And he is that leader right now. And what he said, by the way, in that video, is what has, to an extent, dictated his position to those who have criticized him and those who loved him. And unfortunately, it has not done him good. I appreciate the statement, which clarifies the issues further, but the horse is bolted in terms of how he responded, criticizing the journalist, notwithstanding that he's a player, and he should have accepted and understood that you play in this field, you are at some point going to be criticized. But to go on criticizing journalists and journalism and how by the way, whenever it suits you, but all the time it was okay when they exposed you as a great person who's influential within certain Muslim fraternity. And now, because they found something wanting, which was a true reflection, by the way, you sat next to the so-called Jewish men, and you were chit-chatting with him, not unbeknown to you that he was a Zionist who has called for the expansion of settlements and who has called for the expulsion of the Palestinians and refusal for those who were expelled in 48 and 67 to return back to Palestine. And it's too late for you to respond in a manner that you've done in that letter that is sent to you. You should have done that immediately. But again, I blame people around him. They should have warned him and coached him.
And when you say people around him, what sort of people around him would be part of his advisory brain's trust?
Well, I think at the moment he's surrounded by religious people, which is another problem. In his position, he needs to surround himself with capable individuals, people who understand these things, the diplomatic etiquettes, politics, etc., instead of you continually moving along with religious individuals who are not going to help you when it comes to these matters. Yeah. Ordinarily, you'll have had a personal assistant phoning in, okay, where is he going to be sitting, who's next to him. That's what happens in politics, and you know that, Ashraf. Even a normal MEC will ask, who's in that meeting? Do I come or don't I come? And you'll expect that a person like him who's got so much of the following will know these kind of things. But again, I blame people around him, because he hasn't, I don't think he employed people who are capable. He has employed people who, mashallah, very nice Muslims and who are not really concerned about these kind of things. And this is why you find yourself in the situation you find yourself.
So three things before I let you go. The text apology I've got, it hasn't been public. I get that. I've reached out to him to be interviewed. Of course, he's in Qatar. He's not available at the moment, but he may change his mind tomorrow, right? I would certainly encourage him to put that on video, because video is a different currency that's very different to text, right? To see what happens. But beyond that, right? So three things before I let you go. One, is there a saving grace for Mufti Menk around this issue? There are others who say, of course, he's done nothing wrong. Is there a saving grace? What should he be doing next?
Well, he must accept interviews. One, he should speak to the media. He should clarify his position, but he also should fine-tune his statement. I'm not here to advise him what to do, but I think the best he can do right now, the saving grace, will be to take as many interviews as possible in clarifying his position, and he must stay away from criticizing the media from doing their job, which this time around he doesn't agree with, but all other times he does agree with the publicity that they've given him. So he needs to fine-tune that and take a certain position. And I think that will help him. But again, the videos that he's sending is in his YouTube channel. He's speaking to the converted. But the current discussion is outside that. I mean, these are people who don't really follow Mufti Menk. I'm not his followers. And I know that people like Azad Issa and all others who are around the world know about him, and I know about him, but they don't really follow him. They won't go to his YouTube account to see what he's saying. So if he wants to really, change the perception, he needs to come to the mainstream media. He needs to come to Salam Media and talk to the other who are not necessarily his followers within his YouTube channel.
Yeah, good point. Okay, lastly, the complexities, not just for Mufti Menk, for Thembisa Fakude, who's also pretty well known, by the way. Need I just say that, right? And others who get invited to Makkah and Medina. And the Saudi Arabian, they call it the kingdom. I have a problem with even calling it a kingdom. That's just my personal thoughts about it, right? Very uncomfortable with that. And the United Arab Emirates. I mean, what should Muslim leaders, and I don't mean Mufti Menk, others, right? How should they fraternize and engage with people they sometimes agree with, but often disagree with, and sometimes totally disagree with? Yet they're all part of the broader global Muslim world.
It's a difficult one, but if you look at the track record of what the Emiratis, the Egyptians and Saudis have done in the Muslim world, it's actually worse than what the Saudis have done. Or is worse than what the Israelis have done. If you look what they've done in Yemen, and they continue to do in Egypt, for example, during that protest after the 2011 Arab Spring. I mean, these are human beings who are hell-bent on not only killing, but suppressing basic human rights. 3 individuals in particular, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Mohammed bin Salman, and Mohammed bin Zayed, have created so much havoc within the Middle East. And they are leading this normalization process with Israel, notwithstanding that Israel continues to oppress the people. So I will say, personally, you stay away from those kind of invitations. You don't accept those invitations.
The same could, and I mean, we'll leave it with the same could apply to others where they have this ambivalent position. People are not clear. I'm talking about, for example, the Turkish leader Erdogan, right? For many people, the great savior of the Muslim world. For many others, very critical of how he's come down on political opposition big time in his own country.
Oh yes, true. But if you look at the role of Erdogan in Turkey at the moment, can you imagine what the Ikhwan and all the Muslims who have been fighting in Palestine, who are currently, by the way, most of them are sitting comfortably in Istanbul. If there wasn't Erdogan, we would be in trouble as a Muslim Ummah right now. Notwithstanding his challenges and notwithstanding his oppressive ways of dealing with civil rights and human rights and the media, and he has to be criticized for it. But at least he's playing another role, and that role is giving refuge to hundreds of thousands of Muslims who've been expelled by these dictators in the Middle East, particularly in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Most of our brothers are in Istanbul, sitting comfortably, and they can at least continue doing what they do best after being expelled by these dictators.
And the very last thing, ultimately, it's not about Ben Mufti Menk. It's about the normalization of Israel in the greater Muslim world. Do we see this now increasing? This complete acceptance of Israel and Israeli politics and everybody just saying, yeah, we disagree with each other sometimes, but anyway, we're just part of the human brotherhood of nations.
Well, Mufti Menk made a misjudgment, and I think he should repent after making this misjudgment. But unfortunately, who are we, Ashraf, if the brethren of the Palestinians are normalizing? Sudan, Mauritania, Morocco, Egypt, Saudi Arabia is at the verge. Of course, they can't because they have two holiest mosques. UAE, Bahrain, everyone, the closest brethren of the Palestinians, in other words, the Arabs, are normalizing relations with the Israelis. And that's a problem. And we should condemn it. But we are also in a situation where we don't know what to do because the moral compass and the political compass is supposed to be dictated from that part of the world. So if all of them are normalizing relations with Israel, what are we supposed to do? But Mufti Menk is not from there. Mufti Menk is from Southern Africa. And he has to understand that the majority of Southern African Muslims support Palestine. And if he's going to go and irresponsibly rub shoulders with Zionists and those who are pushing normalization, of course, he's going to have a backlash from where he comes from. And he must expect that and respond appropriately.
And that's where we leave it. Appreciate your time, Thembisa Fakude, certainly getting us to think. And yes, I'm sure people watching you will say the man's spot on. Others will still disagree with you. In the same way, many may disagree with Mufti Menk and say we still don't agree with him. And others may say, I think he's got a point. Ultimately, and this is the space we've created, is for you to judge what came out of it. Feel free to comment on the back end of this conversation on the Salam Media social media platforms, or you can WhatsApp us 061 766 0355. What now with the UAE? What now with Israel? What now with regards to Mufti Menk? Think about that. In the meantime, Sentio is an ethically based asset manager that is focused on delivering superior risk-adjusted returns for their clients regardless of market conditions. For more info on their Sharia investment products, you can visit the website, which is sentiocapital.com, so sentio-capital.com, and start saving towards your investment goals today. Sentio Capital Management, invest for good. Sentio Capital Management is an authorized financial services provider.